What is the most disturbing thing you have ever overheard a parent tell their own child in a public setting? I dated a girl in high school who was adopted. One day I was at the mall with she and her mother when they started fighting, and her mother yelled, "Now I know why your mother put you up for adoption." It was pretty much the worst thing I've ever heard. Not me, but my mother. At the elementary school she worked at, there was one mother who constantly mistreated her son, including whipping him over the slightest things, blatantly favoring his siblings over him, and making him walk to school in the rain. My mom reminisced how she rarely saw the kid being happy. One afternoon during my mom's parent/bus pickup duties, she observed the kid's mom picking him up from school and yelling at him, as usual. Through tears, he asked his mom why he couldn't just go live with his dad. "You won't even have to see me anymore. Why can't I stay with daddy?" Her answer? "Because he, the father, wants you," before slamming the car door and driving off. I still don't understand how that woman never lost custody of him. I was helping my dad fix one of his rentals. The toilet was plugged up, and we found that it was clogged with numerous action figures. My dad asked the renter's child if he was the one who put them in the toilet. To my surprise, he admitted it immediately and apologized. Immediately the renter dragged her kid by the arm into another room. We could still hear everything said, which should have been obvious to her. She said, "Don't you ever betray you or yours ever again. If someone asks you if you did something like that, you say no. You understand me?" Leaning against a telephone pole at a bus stop, just waiting for a friend to meet me there, and then walk to my place. Woman and little girl sitting at the stop. Car pulls up, woman stands and looks at the little girl and says, "If I'm not back in an hour, call your grandma and tell her I said for both of you to get out of this town and disappear." Then she gets in the car and it drives off as my friend comes around the corner. The other day the couple that lives in the apartment downstairs from me were outside trying to get their kids to be quiet and get in their car seats, but they were crying and arguing. The dad was going on with the "shut up, stop crying, stop yelling" stuff, but it was only making them worse. Then the mom really calmly walked over to the door and said, "I'm tired of you two fighting. I don't want two kids anymore. If this is what having two kids is like, I don't want two kids. I'm giving one of you guys up. You better decide which one of you is staying." It shut them up though. We were getting in line to get ice cream when I noticed a $20 on the ground. I asked if it belonged to anyone. A middle-aged woman and a teenage girl, presumably her daughter, sitting near us noticed. The mother nudged the daughter and said, "I think that is yours." The daughter doesn't even look away from her ice cream. "No, it's not." The mother presses on, saying, "Are going sure? I think it is." This back and forth continues. Clearly it isn't hers and the mother wants her to take the $20 anyway. Eventually the kid gives up and agrees, saying she thinks it is hers. Taking the $20 wasn't what bothered us. It was insisting that your daughter did the wrong thing, even when she clearly doesn't want to lie. This actually was said to me. I'm a dancer and used to compete on teams, and as a soloist, I don't compete anymore. College probs. One day, I was competing my solo and just touching up my makeup in the dressing room, where I accidentally was in the way of mom and her daughter who was my age. I said, "Sorry, I'll be out of your way in a second." And the mom says I'm totally fine and something about sharing a bathroom with siblings. I laugh and say, "Oh yeah, I get you. I have 3 younger siblings myself." And the mom says, "Really?" I stopped after you. Right in front of her kid. I smiled uncomfortably, grabbed my bag, and moved to the other side of the room. My first job in my small little town in Australia was manning the toy section of the local Target. It was a lower end suburb, so there was a pretty big indigenous population that stayed in the area. Most of the people actually working at the Target though were either white or some suitably civilized shade of brown. Anyway, what I'm saying is everyone working there was very slightly racist and would pay a little more attention to anyone indigenous who happened to walk in, to reduce shrinkage, of course. So one day I'm in the toy aisle rearranging all the Barbie dolls that some idiot kids had taken off the shelf and abandoned in homewares, when this Aboriginal lady walks by with her daughter. The girl couldn't have been more than 8, and like any 8-year-old she naturally makes a beeline for the Barbies and picks one up to look at it. Her mum, who had let her hand go for a moment, yells, "You put that down, or they'll think you're stealing it," and grabs the girl by the hand and walks off. I felt like shit. Not the least, because that bitch Sandra, who manned the front of the store, had been quietly trailing the two of them since they'd entered. Imagine being surrounded by that level of your hostility your entire life, that you have to pass wisdom like, "Don't pick stuff up from the shelf or people will think you're stealing to your children." People who think Indigenous Australians should just get over it have no goddamn idea of how bad it still is for them in some areas. Made me ashamed to work there. Not really public, but when I was in high school, I was at my best friend's house hanging out. He got in an argument with his mom, and she got so pissed off she said, "I honestly wish I didn't have to put up with your bullshit. You're only here because of divorced sex." Meaning he was conceived when his parents had sex after their divorce. I'm sitting there, instant silence as she storms off. My friend just starts laughing, as if it's the funniest thing he's ever heard. He would even proudly tell random people that he was here because of divorced sex with this big grin on his face. Also, another one was I was at a Kroger, browsing through an aisle. Two young men were with an older man, in guessing their father. One of them was talking about how he beat the shit out of his girlfriend recently and how he felt like a terrible person about it. The older gent puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "Son, boys will be boys." We had a neighbor who lived down the street from us. They weren't married, but had been together forever. The dad had a son from a previous relationship who was grown and out of the house, and they had a daughter and son together. Their daughter was the same age as my younger brother, and their son was 4 years younger than the daughter. We lived in kind of a rural area, so we hung out with each other a lot. One day, we were outside talking and playing, and the daughter was wearing shorts. I don't remember anything unusual about them, like they seemed to fit fine and everything. Well, the dad had a drinking problem, and he stumbles out, drunk, and says to her, "I bet you like how those shorts feel rubbing against your pussy." And then he grabbed her by the shorts, and pulled her off the car she was sitting on, and pulled her shorts up as far as he could. She was maybe 11 or 12 when this incident happened. It still bothers me. Thankfully, her mom finally left that asshole, but I'm fairly certain he sexually abused his daughter repeatedly when she was little. I heard one of my old neighbors say to her son, "If you keep crying like a little bitch, I'll put you in a dress. You want to wear a dress? No? Then shut the fuck up." I was outside gardening with my daughter who was about 6 at the time. Her eyes just went wide, and she asked me why she would talk to her kids like that. I didn't really have a good answer. Just a month ago, me and my boyfriend went to Disney World in Florida. While eating lunch in a quieter, more isolated area, we saw a dad drag his 8-ish-year-old daughter to a table near us, and in hushed tones, but loud enough for us to hear, he said, "You don't deserve to be here, you ungrateful bitch." The rest of the family arrived shortly after with trays of food, and the dad pulled out a tinfoil wrapped sandwich from the mom's purse and threw it at his daughter, while the parents and 2 other kids ate the burgers and fries from the quick serve restaurant. I just felt sick and wanted to cry. On the train around early December last year, I overheard a father shouting at his, couldn't have been much older than 6, son, and threatening him with Santa won't bring you any presents if you keep acting like a little shit, to which the kid replied, "How can you make Santa do that?" And the dad, kneeling down to make eye contact with his son, said, "I'll wait for him to come down the chimney and punch all his fucking teeth out. That's how." I'm sure the son loved both Christmas and his dad after that. I was at a condo community pool and overheard children berating this Asian couple. The kids were straight up telling them to go back to China and using racial slurs. The Asian couple were infuriated and told the kid that he's being racist. They then turned to the mother. Instead of apologizing, the mother told the kids to continue what they were saying and that the Asian couple had no right to tell the kids off. I had no idea what was going on until I put the pieces together an hour after the event. Still makes me mad to this day. After a day of whale watching my GF, and I stopped to Vinbuna Park to have dinner. We were sitting in a booth by a window where she could watch the rain. A homeless woman came up the sidewalk, pushing a shopping cart overloaded with stuff. She was wearing a halter top and stretch shorts, but it's cal, and not really cold out. As she is passing, one of her cart wheels hits something, and her cart almost tips over. She frantically struggles to keep it upright and only loses the rolled up blankets and some clothes. She was trying to pick up her stuff, but it wasn't easy with the rain coming down. I heard laughing and turned to see a family, mom and dad with 2 kids, a boy and girl looking to be 12 and 9 respectively, watching the woman and having a grand time at her misfortune. Dad pointed at the woman and said something, making everyone roar with laughter. Then the daughter said something. I couldn't hear everything, but the parents were obviously teaching their children to look down and even ridicule the less fortunate. My fiance and I were at dinner last year and were seated next to this really bizarre looking family. It was busy and tables were jammed close, so we heard everything they said. The daughter had to have been around 13 and was carrying a little kid stuffed animal and holding it the whole time. The mom wouldn't let the daughter order what she wanted and started body shaming her kid, who was skinny but clearly going through puberty, telling her how disgusting and fat her hips were starting to get. Mom, by the way, was morbidly obese, of course. So the girl ended up having to split a salad with dad, while her slightly older brother had like 3 plates full of food set right in front of him. Wow. Pretty much everything in this thread is things my mother said to me as a child, or rather screamed at me, except the swearing. She will never swear. Swearing is punishable by a hell of a beating in her book. Some of the things she thinks are more acceptable to say to a child than a swear word include: I've had enough of you. I'm having you put in a home. Picks up phone and pretends to dial. Stop that noise or I'll beat you black and blue. I was crying because I was 4 and my brother had just thrown me, literally, out of a bunk bed. I'd already told her this. You're a bitch. No wonder all your boyfriends leave you. They find out what you're really like. I was 15 to 16 and very insecure. If it wasn't for me, you'd be starving on the streets because nobody else would want you. If you don't stop complaining, I'm going to tell that policeman what you're like at home and he'll throw you straight in prison. Other adult wouldn't put up with this behavior. She'd have got rid of you long ago, and so on. I used to work in a kindergarten and we had a kid around 3Y. Oh, who wouldn't, and mostly couldn't talk yet. He said a few words at home, but while in kindergarten only made noises and gestures to get us to understand, but was making progress and we were getting medical help at the request of the mother. At this time it was popular between the older kids to go to each other's places after kindergarten, and this kid really wanted to join that, but the mother's answer: when you start talking to your friends, you can go to their place after kindergarten. And no surprise, all our progress was lost and locked himself in even more. I was in shock. I just couldn't believe what I heard. This woman was so unhappy with her son not talking, nagging day in and day out that we must help her, and she just throws every bit of progress out the window. It was so sad. Sorry for bad England. Not someone else, but me. When I was 11 or 12, we went to Disney and my dad kept bugging me about why I looked so unhappy. I wasn't. I just have a resting bitch face. Eventually, we were at some chicken restaurant surrounded by tons of people and he called me an ungrateful bitch in front of 30 people. Most disturbing to me isn't the nasty or violent stuff. It's the subtle everyday things that bit by bit make the child view themselves as a bad person. If you tell a child they're naughty or difficult or awkward or whatever every day for years, that child is going to grow up to be those things. It's why when I'm at work, I work in a preschool, I'm careful to chastise children's actions, not the children themselves, when they do something wrong. Was at the science center in St. Louis on Valentine's Day with my girlfriend at the time. We were walking across the covered bridge connecting the two sides and there was a mom with her child walking in front of us. He was maybe a foot in front of her when she screamed at the top of her lungs, "If you keep walking that far in front of me, someone is going to steal you," and just kept walking. The kid didn't even react, and the mom never closed the very small gap between her and her son. I'm the parent in this one. My son has one of those kitchen playsets and various toy utensils/food items, and refers to playing with the set as home living, an awesome name for it. He picked up at daycare. One day during the height of his infatuation with home living, we were at a store and wasn't following me or kept grabbing stuff off the shelf or was in general engaging in a behavior that I needed him to correct. So I told him, "Son, you need to listen to me or you are going to lose your home living privilege." It pretty quickly dawned on me that without context, that must have sounded pretty concerning to folks around us. Okay, this isn't something I heard, but something I saw, and it was pretty weird and quite disturbing. So I was working as a tourist informer, and then came a woman with a young girl. She wasn't too young, maybe around 11 over 12, very quiet, quite normal looking. Until I realized the woman was keeping the girl on a fucking leash. I'm not kidding. She had like those corsets with leashes that people put on their babies, but for a tween. The mother just took the information and left with the girl on a leash. I was like, what the cosmic eternal fuck did I just see? I was working at Kohl's, so this happened 3 or 4 years ago. A woman approached me with her very young son, no older than 4, probably. His little red wet face tells me Jez upset and scared. Mom demands he hand it over. He hesitates and starts to cry, but reaches a tiny fist towards me. I take from him a little baggie with the extra button from a shirt. Immediately I start to try and comfort him, but as I get "it's okay little guy" out of my mouth, his mom starts in on me, angrily. No, it wasn't okay, she tells me, sternly. Her son will not grow up and be a thief. I need to tell him that I will call police and have him taken to jail. I just refused. She was causing a scene. He was terrified and hysterical as she clearly was threatening him with these things prior to my involvement. I was horrified. I told her I won't be held responsible for traumatizing her kid and she needs to chill out. SJE just grabbed her sobbing kid up and left. People like her and other parents I've had to witness are why I think that people should have to have a license to have children. There are too many people free to breed in this country who shouldn't have babies.